This is a reading of The Boys' War. Confederate and Union soldiers talk about the Civil War, Chapter 7. It's called Changes. And here we see a picture, and the caption says, "A 14-year-old Confederate soldier killed by bayonet at Fort Mahone." All right, now the text tells us fighting a war changes any soldier, but is especially changed when the boys who fought in the Civil War, when they had enlisted, they were naive, undisciplined, and used to doing farm related chores. Given several months of drilling and experience in battle, these boys had turned into true soldiers. Granted, they would never have the spit and polish to impress anyone while on parade, but their skill in the field had been honed to a killing edge. The fear and confusion that often gripped them in the early fighting gave way to a cooler, more analytical head. In the smoke and roar and chaos of battle, these boys would now hold their lines, obey drum commands, and listen for orders. And when a command was issued, they had learned to follow it even in the face of enemy fire. What follows are several descriptions of later battles that given some idea of what this fighting might have been like. John Mulvaney and his regiment had been positioned on a slight rise of the land near a cornfield when he spotted Union forces moving closer. In the field below us, the enemy are slowly but cautiously approaching, crouching low as they advanced behind the undulating tracks in the rich meadows through which they are passing. From the numbers of their flags, which are distinctly visible above the rising ground, we judge them to be at least 2,000 in number. The Confederate artillery opens fire, and this halts the charge for a while. Then, when the Union cannons return the fire, destroying all of the Confederate cannons and sending the troops into action again, Mulvaney picks up his history. The Yankees, finding no batteries opposing them, approach closer and closer, cowering down as near to the ground as possible, while we keep up a pretty warm fire by file upon them as they advance. Now they are at least at, I'm sorry, now they are at the last elevation of rising ground when they rise up and make a charge for our fence. Tom Galway did not fight against Mulvaney, but his description of another battle gives a good idea of what such a fight must have been like from his point of view. Forward, we go over fences and through an apple orchard. Now we are close to the enemy. They rise up in the sunken lane and pour deadly fire into us. Our men drop in every few files. The ground on which we are charging has no depression, no shelter of any kind. There is nothing to do but advance or break into a rout. We know there's no support behind us on this side of the creek. So we go forward on the run, heads downward as if under a pelting rain. At this point in the charge, reinforcements arrive to support the Confederate lines, and the gunfire intensifies. Galway and his friends are forced to halt and wait for orders. The fight goes on with unabated fury. The air is alive with the concussion of all sorts of explosion. We are kneeling in the soft grass, and I notice for a long time that almost every blade of grass is moving. For some time, I suppose that this caused by the merry crickets. It is not until I made a remark to that effect that one of our boys near me and noticed him laugh, and I know it is bullets that are falling thickly around us. And this picture shows Union soldiers camped just outside Chattanooga. This group would be cut off from supplies for weeks and face starvation. The enemy moves some cannons into place and loses a terrible volley of shot and shell. Galway details its effect. Lieutenant Delaney is shot. Lieutenant Lantry, poor fellow, is annihilated instantly near me. The top of his head is taken off by a shell. Our company is narrowing more and more, but there is a small group of us left. Fairchild is bleeding. Campion falls, mortally wounded. Jim Gallagher's head is badly grazed and he rolls coiled in a lump down in a ditch. In the opening months of the war, the tendency would have been for one or the other side to pull troops back to safer locations. Better to yield ground than to give up lives needlessly. But as the war dragged on, pressure mounted from the citizens and politicians back home for some sort of resolution to the conflict. This pressure was passed along to the commanding officers of both armies, resulting in longer, fiercer battles. And in this picture, it says Confederate sharpshooter killed at Gettysburg. At this point in our imagined battle, the Confederate officers see that the Union forces are badly shot up and wavering. This is their chance to strike at the Union line and possibly send it into retreat. Despite their own high casualties, a Confederate charge is ordered, and John Delaney and his fellow soldiers obey instantly. Now we are over a fence and line. We are to charge is right ahead. Again, we form a line, now dashing through a cornfield. The bullets whistle through the leaves and ears and send many brave comrade to his last account. But we have no time to think. Such is the excitement, such the feeling with which I am inspired that I rush on with the rest, completely bewildered and scarcely heeding what takes place around us. Just seconds before the Confederate charge is launched, the Union officers realize that they will be wiped out if they do not act. Galway relates what happened then. Our ammunition is running low. The order is passed along the line for us to charge, but there are no bugles to sound it. But we look at one another and fixing our bayonets, we raise a cheer and go forward. It is but a hop, skip, and a jump to their lines. Horrible sight. The dead lay piled through this lane covered with blood. Such close range, fierce fighting became more and more common. And because soldiers were more skilled than at war's beginning, the number of deaths increased dramatically. During the first 12 weeks of the Civil War, a total of 700 Union and Confederate soldiers were killed. The next 2 months alone saw a frightening escalation of the fighting, with over 10,000 more soldiers killed. In the end, over 620,000 soldiers, 360,000 Union and 260,000 Confederate, would die, more than the combined total deaths in all the other wars America has fought in before or since. The boys fighting in the war were surrounded by its carnage. In the Battle of Gettysburg alone, over 7,000 men would die and another 44,000 would be left wounded or missing in action. Even when not fighting, boys were more often confronted by scenes such as this one witnessed by Tom Galway. We passed over the old battlefield of Manassas. The rains of 2 years have uncovered many of the shallow graves. Bony knees, long toes, and grinning skulls are to be seen in all directions. In one place, I saw a man's boot protruding from the grave. The stitches had rot, and the sole of the shoe warped downward, while the upper had curled upward, leaving the skeleton toes pointing to a land where there is no war. This is a picture and it shows a dead Confederate soldier. And here's another picture, just a few of the dead left on the field at Gettysburg. Oy. Living every day with so much death and mutilation took a profound emotional toll on these boys. Where it might have stunned them before, made them physically ill, and stirred longing for the safety of home. Now they turned off those feelings. They rarely dwelt on encounters with death for long, and instead ignored them in order to get with other things. Galway ends his journey through Manassas battlefield with horrid sights are to a soldier horrid no longer. Toward evening, we bivouacked near Gainesville. And here is another picture with the caption that says, "A burial detail gathers up what is left behind of the dead at Cold Harbor, Virginia, 1865. It isn't hard to imagine why they acted like this. They had joined the army with friends and neighbors, and through shared experiences, created a new family. But as they were becoming a more unified group, the war was slowly eating away at their numbers. Alicia Stockwell had marched off with 32 others from his town. 2 years later, only 3 of them were still alive. One boy who had taken part in several major battles recalled waking just before the Battle of Antietam. We are aroused early on the 16th by a shell which exploded over the regimental colors, killing Corporal Farmer, the color bearer. A piece of the shell literally cut him in two. But we cooked our breakfast and chatted as usual. Some of the men even gambled. Such descriptions seemed distant and cold to us. How could anyone witness such a horrible scene and go on to eat breakfast so casually? It's important to remember that these boys really were skilled soldiers. They knew that the chance to eat a meal might not come along again soon, especially if the battle turned out to be a large one. And they also knew that to think too much about this aspect of war might distract them and make them less precise and poised in battle. Still, a sense of sadness creeps into their writing. They knew that they were no longer the innocent boys who had signed up for a great adventure. Private Henry Graves expressed his confusion in his letter home. "I saw the body of a man killed the previous day this morning, and a horrible sight it was. Such sights do not affect me as they once did. I cannot describe the change, nor do I know when it took effect. Yet I know that there is a change, for I look on the carcass of a man with pretty much such a feeling as I would do if it were a horse or a hog."